Many believe that Yuusha ended the last video listening to Godsmack, but the truth is that he got incredibly drunk on gin and passed out watching Jenna Marbles. What a vibe, he thought. However, the next day he awoke, ashamed of what he'd become.
Was I wearing eyeliner?
I think it looks good. Or rather, you think it looks good.
American voice in my head again? No big deal, that's why we drink gin.
He returned to his office, pretending all was well in his world, doing his best to ignore the voice in his head.
Will you stop narrating as if you know me, please?
Yuusha was growing increasingly frustrated with his narrator.
He's just in denial.
I'm losing my fucking mind.
Yuusha was losing his fucking mind.
Fuck off!
Fine, I didn't want this job anyway.
I think you pissed her off.
Well, folks, here we go. Prince of Persia 3, or Prince of Persia The Two Thrones. The last in the Prince of Persia Sands of Time trilogy. I know, it's sad, but all good things must come to an end. And same as last time, this is technically part 3 in a series, so if you want to do some catching up, click the cards that appear, or continue watching. You do what you want, and that's what people love about you.
Wow, you're a good liar.
Shut up, American me. So Prince of Persia The Two Thrones, the third and final chapter in Prince's epic Sands of Time saga. Going into this game, I was quite excited. I don't know if this came across so far, but this Prince of Persia trilogy are games I would replay constantly growing up, and I remember I would always have this mental debate before choosing which one to replay for the 100th time. Sands of Time, the first with really nice visuals, fun Dagger of Time combat system, as well as the great dialogue and characters that feel real. Warrior Within, edgy, difficult, but with a fun varied combat system and a big scary loon Dahaka. Two Thrones, an amalgamation of the other two with improved parkour, stealth mechanics, a return of the prince's internal dialogue, and the Dark Prince segments. I think I'll go with Sands of Time again.
Pussy.
That's genuinely how it would often go. Now, you might hear that and think I'm going to go on a tirade about how Two Thrones is this awful game that nobody should enjoy, but I want to assure you, it's actually quite the opposite. Have you ever played a game that you love, but it's just kind of bogged down by certain sections that you really dislike? Enough prefacing and stuff though, let's just kick things off by returning to where we left off last time. So, Warrior Within ended with Prince and Kylina leaving the Island of Time and returned to Babylon, having just killed the Dahaka and sharing some sweet, mature themes on the boat ride home. Upon arriving back at Babylon, they are met with chaos as Babylon burns and its people are ransacked by war. They set their sights on Prince and Kylina's ship, with them being washed up on shore and Kylina being taken away by the enemy's soldiers. Now, literally every time I boot this game up for the first time and I see this opening segment, I think how ugly the game looks, but the strange thing is this game is actually quite gorgeous. It's just this opening segment that for some reason looks awful. No doubt in part to the fact that Kylina's model is so low poly and ugly looking, this being due to the fact that... Spoiler, but Kylina doesn't really appear much past this opening section. Yep, try to keep up with me as I give a brief intro to the plot of this game. Leading on after Warrior Within, Prince succeeded in his mission to change the timeline to where the sands were never found by the Maharaja, and therefore never found their way into Prince's hands in the first game, and in doing so saved Kylina from her fate to die at the hands of Prince. But in changing things, this also meant that the Vizier was never killed by Prince, and who happens to be the big bad this game? You guessed it.
The Vizier!
However, in this game, he's actually got a name, which is Zurvan. Zurvan wants Kylina because he knows that she's the Empress of Time, so he kills Kylina using the Dagger of Time, thereby creating the Sands of Time. He then stabs himself with the Dagger of Time. So if the Sands were never made, then how come the Dagger of Time exists, and how come Zurvan has it? Stabbing himself with it makes him immortal, and it also turns him into a big scarab, I want to say. Either way, he's a big bug. And this becomes our big villain throughout the game, chasing the Vizier who has turned himself into a big bug. And that's the setup for the story this time around. Kylina is dead, Prince is separated from the Vizier, and you need to track him down to get your revenge. This is just my opinion, but I've never liked the design of the Vizier's big scary final form, because it just looks ridiculous. We went from being afraid of this big scary Dahaka motherfucker to now being afraid of a big bug. I can't say I'm shaking in my boots whenever I look at him. There's actually a lot to talk about here in terms of the game's visual design, especially in comparison to the previous games. Something interesting we can do is compare the designs of characters from Sands of Time to how they appear in Two Thrones, since we have Prince Zurvan, or the Vizier, and later on we actually encounter everyone's favourite female companion to the Prince, Farah. Yes, Farah makes her triumphant return. And she's American now.
Dagger of Time.
How did you come to possess that?
Here we go again.
I took it. From the Vizier.
That traitor. He murdered my father, enslaved my people, imprisoned me. And all in the name of becoming some kind of god.
I know too well what he is capable of. But I intend to find him and punish him for what he has done to my kingdom.
You are the son of Shahraman? The Prince of Persia?
It's pretty fascinating to see the designs of these characters from the first game compared to how they look in Two Thrones. It's like going from a Pixar cartoon to a real human. They're much grittier looking and it almost makes the old designs look silly in comparison, but even outside of how they look, the Vizier went from this frail and practically dying man to someone who looks a fair bit more threatening until he becomes a big glowy bug. In a vacuum, however, I think the old designs hold up incredibly well, and it's hard for me to say which iteration of the Prince I prefer, honestly, since Two Thrones Prince is the same model from Warrior Within, but obviously with a few tweaks to his overall aesthetic. And I think with this model you get a more fleshed out face with Two Thrones, since it's slightly higher poly and clear with its textures, although sometimes Prince looks a little lobotomized, but it looks good, and for whatever reason Prince is topless throughout most of the game with a big nasty bloody glowing arm with a chainsaw through it. No, legit, the Prince just falls down a sewer and then wakes up topless.
What's happening? What has the Vizier done to me? I don't...
What happened to this loon? I ain't complaining. I will forever have a soft spot for Sands of Time Prince, but I can't deny there's something a bit more distinct visually about the Prince in Two Thrones. The glowing arm is key to the other half of this game. It signifies Prince being corrupted by the Sands. After the Maharaja kills Kylina and unleashes the Sands, those around him begin to be attacked and corrupted by them, the Prince included. The difference with Prince being he was smart to know if I grab the Dagger of Time, I'll be protected by the Sands. He does so, but just quick enough to where he's only partially been corrupted, so now occasionally Prince will turn into what is known canonically as the Dark Prince, with charcoal skin, glowing marks all over, darker, more destroyed looking clothes, and flaming Super Saiyan-like hair. Dark Prince is built up to be much more powerful than regular Prince, and it shows. In this form, you can actually attack using the chainsword that's been embedded in Prince's arm, called the Dagger Tail. He flails it around like a chain, and the combat just becomes a button masher, since you really need to think about what you're doing as you just decimate groups of enemies. Now that might sound well and good, but like most good things in the world, it has a dark side. When you're walking along and hit a segment where Prince transforms, it comes with a feeling of dread, as Dark Prince requires a bit of upkeep. As Dark Prince, your health is constantly falling at a fairly rapid pace, and the only way to replenish it is by collecting sand. Thankfully, for the most part, this isn't too difficult, since during these sections it means every piece of the environment you can break, so pots, boxes, etc., and enemies, all drop sands, which put you back to full health. The goal of these parts being to reach water to undo the transformation, because I guess much like the Dahaka, sand monster abominations hate water. Like I say, for the most part, this doesn't cause too much issue, but some sections are pretty tricky, which meant you could lose some health along the way, and when you lose health as Dark Prince, man, you really feel it. There could be a long stretch with no sands and you'll just die, even though you can see the water. It was so close! Up until now, Prince of Persia has always taken place in a fairly contained environment. In Sands of Time, you were making your way through the Maharaja's palace. Warrior Within had you fighting your way back and forth through the Island of Time, but for the first time, Two Thrones has you in a more open outdoor environment, travelling the streets and rooftops of Prince's home of Babylon, eventually making your way to the top of the Tower of Babel. Babel, 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 Beyblade, Baby Bell, whatever man, just say it how you like. I love the decision to have the environment be more civilian, since it meant they could be more creative with the sorts of obstacles they throw your way in. With that, it's the perfect time to praise the new additions to the tried and true gameplay we've had up until now. Sands of Time laid the groundwork with the parkour mechanics we all know and love already. Warrior Within built on top of it with a more varied and extensive combat system and slight tweaks to the parkour. Two Thrones took all the good from that and once again built onto it. Especially with the parkour, we now have a bunch of new additions. As you make your way through the streets of Babylon, you'll have to familiarise yourself with these new parkour techniques, as often you'll need to do them on the fly with little preparations, so you need to remember what these look like. The first new addition are these little panels in the wall which Prince stabs with his dagger to latch onto. From here you can drop down, climb up if there's something to grab onto above you, including another dagger panel, or you can run across the wall. Not as far as from ground level, but it's a very flexible obstacle, and man does this one alone help freshen up the gameplay, leading to more interesting lines of parkour. Next we have these wooden panels you'll see on walls which you need to jump from while wall running, and they send Prince at a 45-degree angle. They're used a lot in quick lines of parkour and often multiple in a row, and they're great, for the most part. Like I did with Warrior Within, I'm playing the Steam version on PC. Now this could be a problem exclusive to that version of the game, I'm not entirely sure, but these wooden panels, Sometimes they just don't work right. Admittedly, I only ever experienced this in one area in the game, quite close to the end and as you're climbing the Tower of Babel. That's how I've always pronounced it. Deal with it. You get to this part where you need to run across a wall, then hit the jump pad and grab one of the dagger panels, but for some reason, it just didn't send me at quite the right trajectory and I missed the dagger panel, even though I was mashing the button. It just didn't work. I kept trying over and over until I ran out of sands and had to do the whole area all over again. I kept trying though until eventually by some stroke of luck, I got it. I don't know what I did differently, it just decided to work.
You seem mad.
I'm fine, mate. Lastly, we have these well, the wiki page calls them shoots, so we'll go with that. And I think these are great. These in particular work greatly with the new stealth mechanics in the game, since you can now sneak up behind unaware enemies and kill them as long as you can hit all the quick time events. Sometimes you can even use these to kill 2 enemies at once, and I love this mechanic. I'll come back to it though. Shoots are just one of those parts of the game that whenever you encounter them, they feel good to use and feel like they belong. You can clamber up them or slide down and turn 180 while using them, and I feel like they're honestly not utilised as much as they should be. They feel like a really natural addition to the game as they blend seamlessly within the environments and lend themselves well to the stealth kill opportunities. There's also one more thing, but it's kind of forgettable, and that's these hanging chains. Prince climbs down them upside down like he's Spider-Man, which makes sense as Dark Prince because when you're above an enemy on a chain, he uses the dagger tail to grab and hang them, but as normal Prince, it just seems needlessly hazardous to climb down while hanging upside down. I don't get it. One of the bigger aspects of change found in this game is, as I mentioned, the sort of stealth kill mechanic. It's kind of basic, but it is implemented well enough to where you can easily take advantage of it. The way it works is if you're near an unaware enemy, Prince will take on a lowered, more stealthy stance. Providing you stay out of sight and get close enough to an enemy, you will see a flash on screen at which point you press the grab button. It does commit one of gaming's cardinal sins by having quick time events where you need to hit the button in time to get a stealth kill, and if you mess up the enemy will counter your attack, but there are only a few animations so you can quickly get used to the timing on these, and they're fairly satisfying to use. To quickly get rid of enemies with ease, and being able to jump from a shoot to quickly execute 2 enemies at once looks pretty damn sick, and I found myself using this quite often. The combat is still fun like before, but enemies can be really awkward to take out sometimes, so this just helps speed along the process just a bit. The main difference you'll find with the Dark Prince is just his use of the dagger tail, the chainsword thing which isn't used just for combat. While playing as Dark Prince, you need to keep your eyes open for those flaming lanterns as they signify places Dark Prince can use his dagger tail to swing from, both on the wall and over pits. And these are such a nice addition as it requires agency from you the player to time it right and to remember to do it, and again, they're just satisfying moves to execute. Can you tell yet? I love these games.
Nope, I didn't fucking realize, mate.
Back in the day when I'd play this game, I really didn't appreciate the Dark Prince sections as much as I should have because the health drain took away from it, at least for me, but looking at them these days from a more critical and, let's be honest, educated lens, I can see why they're set up the way they are. They needed to do these in quick, short bursts because it fundamentally changes the gameplay of Prince of Persia, and that wouldn't have sat well with many players who prefer the standard way of playing. Having this type of gameplay contained to short sections of the game feels like a nice way to keep things interesting and varied without rocking the boat too much, so I have to praise the rather intelligent way they went about implementing this. Bravo, Ubisoft! So what the hell is the deal with Dark Prince, right? Dark Prince is the embodiment of the ruthless and brutal warrior side of Prince we grew to understand throughout Warrior Within. The pressure and desperation he had during Warrior Within drove him to change fundamentally as a person for the duration of that ordeal, and bear in mind in this game only takes place a few weeks after that game ended, so the dichotomy presented in this game is almost like a split personality. The humble and noble intentions of normal Prince, mixed with the ruthless, heartless, violent warrior side of the Prince, and you can see this conflict as the game progresses. Because they brought back Prince's internal monologuing, we now have this darker side of the Prince to add a more cynical edge to things.
That sounds dumb.
Would you fucking say to me? I love this. As I mentioned previously, part of the fun of Sands of Time was how you grew to know and understand Prince simply through him chatting to himself and getting lost in his thoughts while travelling alone or having banter with Farah, and this returns in all its glory.
I'm impressed.
Oh, good. Your opinion means a great deal to me.
Is that how you thank the man who just saved your life?
First, you did not save my life. I did. Second, you are not a man. Just a disembodied voice. A ghost. And third, I never asked for your help, and I certainly do not need it.
While I admire your bravado, you would be wise to show some respect.
And you would be wise to keep quiet. You are distracting me and we are no longer alone.
Prince will remark about memories he has had in the streets of Babylon or his time spent on the island of time, and even talks about how he went through so much with Farah, but because of his actions in meddling with time, this Farah doesn't even know or recognize Prince. In fact, she refers to him as stranger to begin with, and Prince accidentally blurts out her name, even though they technically have no prior experience talking to each other.
Well, look at that.
Farah!
How do you know my name?
Yes,
I eagerly await your response.
I have heard tales, wondrous tales of a beautiful and brave princess of India. One who has traveled to Babylon seeking to punish an evil vizier who has caused her great distress.
See? Now she's going to kill us.
How in the world have you managed to survive this long? Good luck, stranger.
All the while, we have the new darker side of the prince throwing his 2 cents into the conversation, meant to represent more of the prince's unfiltered thoughts and desires about the situation at hand, and the growing relationship with Farah and how he should handle chasing the vizier. I really can't help but praise the fact that Prince of Persia 2 Thrones brought this back, because it was absent from Warrior Within, and that was absolutely heartbreaking for me. On top of the character banter, we also have Kylina narrating the whole story as we go along, and she also serves as the voice we hear when saving the game.
Is this where I should resume the tale next time? Good.
Implying she's telling a story, much like in Sands of Time, how it was Prince telling the story to Farah. Did I ever mention what I feel is not necessarily a flaw, but a sort of funny consequence of this storytelling narrative style? Especially in Sands of Time, you'll be playing the game as per normal and say, fall into a spike pit and die. And if you die, Prince says,
No. It didn't end there.
so am I supposed to believe Prince, mid-story, was like, I ran across this wall, got hit by a saw, fell, got impaled on a spike, and then I died? Oh wait, that didn't happen. What am I like?
It's plausible.
It's really not. But for all I'm praising this game for, there are some parts I could live without. As I mentioned before, this game likes to throw different minigame sections at you, like a chariot section. Now, this didn't bother me too much, honestly. The chariots are tolerable. You just guide the chariot through tight streets while jumping ramps and such, but the turning is really stiff feeling, and if you hit a wall you instantly die, so it can be a real pain in the ass. All the while you've got enemies jumping at you to get to the prince, which you can just get rid of by mashing the attack button and knocking the other chariots into walls. But then it'll throw a section at you where you jump on a giant dude's back, and once again you need to guide him through tight areas while smashing through big wooden doors, and I really could have lived without this. It adds nothing and just felt confusing. It was like padding for the game, which I don't think this game needed, to be honest. It feels like a good length, and most of the time, bar these drawn out sections of minigames, you feel like you're progressing at a decent pace. It keeps you interested since the environments are always changing as you go from Babylon streets to rooftops to caves and gardens, etc. There's plenty of variety in the visuals, all the while you can see the Tower of Babel growing ever closer in the distance as you make your way towards it. Sand powers make their triumphant return once again. You get new powers and sand tanks by finding these portals as you play. These portals are what the Vizier uses to get around the city with ease. Prince wants to find these and shut them down, and as he does so, he gets rewarded with sand power-ups, although they've been simplified quite a lot this time. The main one you get for combat is the sand explosion. You get rewind and slow down, and that's about it. The reason for this is due to them shifting a lot of the combat focus to Dark Prince, and this really works in the game's favour, since normal Prince ends up being more about the platforming and puzzle solving, whereas Dark Prince is very combat oriented. It's a nice balance, and each section plays to their strengths well. In researching this game, I actually found some old developer diaries from back in the day when this game was still in production, and it seems the game we were supposed to get was very different from the one we ended up getting in the end. It seems when they originally conceptualized Prince of Persia 3, they wanted to make the city of Babylon freely accessible, like an open world with a more open-ended story that you could tackle in whichever order you wanted, but I guess due to limitations at the time, this version of the game never came to be. However, I think it's a fairly safe guess that the initial idea for Prince of Persia 3 planted the seed for what would eventually become the Assassin's Creed series. Well, the reality of the situation is that they originally wanted to make a Prince of Persia reboot game, and it was going to be called Prince of Persia Assassin, but I guess the guys who were working on it had this idea for a game, but it didn't explicitly fit the setting of Prince of Persia. An example of Ubisoft sticking with an IP that was clearly popular, but the team working on it fancied doing something completely different. Needless to say, the early idea for what would eventually become the Assassin's Creed series of games were definitely floating around at the time of Two Thrones. Love it or hate it, this is the end of the Prince of Persia Sands of Time trilogy, and for many people, the end of Prince of Persia as a series. What more can I say? Prince of Persia Sands of Time, Prince of Persia Warrior Within, Prince of Persia Two Thrones. Man, these games are truly special to me. In a fairly sizable library of PS2 games I owned growing up, These three were definitely some of my most played games in there, and I wouldn't have had it any other way. These games birthed a genre and paved the way for series like Assassin's Creed to get their chance to shine. Yeah, it's unfortunate that Prince of Persia is largely irrelevant these days, but what we got were three memorable and truly legendary games to enjoy for many years to come. And hey, I follow good old Jordan Meshner on Twitter, and there have been some murmurs of a potential new Prince of Persia on the horizon. It seems Jordan Meshner is interested in reviving the series in some capacity, and I feel Ubisoft is in a pretty good standing to where they could afford the risk of bringing the Prince of Persia series back in full. They've definitely not forgotten that this series exists, with the Dagger of Time being available to find in Assassin's Creed Odyssey with a weapon called the Edge of Time, and a Prince of Persia crossover event for For Honor. These videos are something I've wanted to cover for a long time, and it's a series very personally significant to me, and I hope you'll consider checking them out, because the more interest out there for Prince of Persia, the more chance we have of a possible resurrection.
That, or they'll just keep making more Assassin's Creed.
Fun fact, as I was working on this video, Ubisoft registered a domain for Prince of Persia 6. As well as that, there was also a video discovered from way back in 2012 on YouTube called Prince of Persia Redemption, which is, I guess, an animation made to look like gameplay of a possible Prince of Persia that we're going to make. And it looks very interesting, so I highly recommend checking out Prince of Persia Redemption. This is technically the end slate, so if you want, like, subscribe, Patreon, all that good shit. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
I have a feeling I'm not in Azad anymore.